As a rapidly developing city, Hong Kong faces some pressing issues, such as a high carbon footprint and high population density. These are challenges that Hong Kong focuses on in addressing climate change. To tackle these challenges, it is necessary to focus on making a transition to a lower carbon economy in order to create a sustainable future for Hong Kong. In this new series on corporate governance, the topic of Session 1 is Tackling Climate Change. David Simmonds, Vice President and Chairman of the Hong Kong Chartered Governance Institute, discusses the call for action specifically on business to respond to climate change.
Before I get into the detail of my presentation, I wanted to start with a simple chart. Many of you would have seen something like this before. The numbers move around a bit, but the message is essentially the same. And that is that the market capitalization of Tesla is greater now than the combined market capitalization of most of the world's major vehicle manufacturers. And there's probably no more powerful a representation of the rewards from climate than this, and the challenges as well. And the other vehicle manufacturers are challenged as the world rushes to switch to electric vehicles. And some mistake this as hype. But the reality is, Tesla makes more profit on each car it sells, about 3 times more than the traditional vehicle manufacturers. And as I go through my presentation today, I want you to remember this chart and this example, because too often the rewards for action on climate get overlooked in the face of the very obvious challenges and risks associated with climate. So with that said, today I want to focus my remarks on the call for action specifically on business to respond to climate change. The many reasons why it makes sense for companies to act now, and the critical role that governance and we as governance professionals must play in preparing the companies that we work for to navigate through the challenges in this area and towards the rewards. Now, the scientific community have been long warning about the catastrophic impacts of climate change. And in the face of what to many is a stubbornly inadequate response from governments globally, the pressure on business to help solve the problem continues to grow. And there are lots of good reasons for companies to act now. Capital is moving. We have seen an absolute sea change in the attitude of investors in relation to climate action over the last 3 to 5 years. And the flow of funds into sustainable investments is growing rapidly, as you can see from the chart. And with that money comes rising expectations on companies in relation to how we deal with climate. But not only is capital moving, staff are as well. Companies with solid credentials and track record on climate change are associated with much greater staff attractiveness and retention. And this is especially true for younger talent. And in a tight labour market, that can be the critical difference between attracting and retaining the sort of talent we need. It had been thought for a long time that customers, while they were interested in climate action, were not prepared to pay more or to alter their consumption habits to address the problem. That is changing, and COVID has played a key part in accelerating customer preferences in this area. And you can see it among the clamour of companies seeking to advertise their green credentials. And as the share of wallet of millennials increases in the years ahead, that trend is only likely to accelerate. Climate has now risen to the level that CEOs are losing their jobs over it. Initially, the main cause was CEOs who were too ambitious or sought to move too aggressively to transition their company to deal with climate change. Then it became those that talked too fast, who claimed that the company was taking action but were doing little in reality. In recent years, the trend has really swung around to deal with CEOs who are not taking steps adequately to deal with climate change or are seen as out of step with investor expectations. Now, while there are lots of good reasons why companies should act, the pace of change here in Hong Kong still appears to be quite slow. Earlier this year, KPM published a report in conjunction with the Chartered Governance Institute and CLP was involved as well, on climate change reporting in Hong Kong. And the report included a survey which had a number of findings in it, notably that a staggering 86% of companies did not have a climate transition plan, and 47% of respondents considered it unlikely that they would have one. Now, Hong Kong, as an international financial centre, is not immune from the trends that are happening elsewhere in the world. And if Hong Kong doesn't follow the flow of money into sustainable investment, that money will go somewhere else. And I want to focus on a few key areas today where I think thoughtful but relatively modest tweaks to the governance processes and frameworks can make a very material difference. So let's start with the governance framework. I think traditional governance frameworks may not be well suited to deal with an issue like climate change. The lens through which most organizations address climate change, at least initially, is either through compliance or risk. If you look at compliance, that's largely reporting, which is backward-looking. And when it comes to risk, most enterprise risk management frameworks have a field of vision out 2 to 3 years at most. And the problem with climate change is that the material risks for most organizations will manifest over a longer time horizon than that. And that's one of the reasons why at CLP we chose to establish a sustainability committee of the board. It has a remit specifically to consider the longer-term issues affecting the company, both the risks and the opportunities. We have an audit and risk committee, obviously, whose job it is, apart from risk management to that 2 to 3 year period, to look at the assurance and the oversight of the numbers that we publish in this area, so that the sustainability committee doesn't get bogged down looking backwards on reporting of those sorts of issues. And so the sustainability committee is then able to focus on the longer term issues and provides a forum through which the directors can have a more free-flowing discussion over those longer term issues impacting the company. And you'll find that the directors on the board tend to naturally select for this committee. Those that are shorter term focused or not interested in those issues will simply not join. But those that do have an interest will definitely want to be associated with the sort of issues that that committee addresses. It does then provide for us a very useful forum in which we can have discussions over climate change in particular, both the risks and opportunities. And importantly, once we've got the position through the Sustainability Committee and it goes on to the full board for consideration, it's better prepared and it has the support often of a number of key directors from the Sustainability Committee when it comes to the discussion in the main board. In terms of management, my role covers both strategy, sustainability, in addition to governance. And that allows a much better integration of sustainability into the corporate strategy. And under strategy, we have our research and our corporate venture capital teams who focus on looking at those sorts of industry, startups and technology trends that have the ability to disrupt or impact the business. A heavy emphasis in that area is on climate-related technology and innovation, and most of that for a power company is actually positive. So it really sets the right mindset around the management of those sorts of issues within the company. Now, when you take a step back and you think about the challenges and changes that are impacting on every company, whether it's from climate change or from the sort of technology trends that are buffeting us all, I think it becomes pretty apparent that the skills and the experience on the board also need to evolve. Board refresh done well is a critical enabler to companies to address climate change, to manage the risks, and more importantly, to find the opportunities that spring from the shifts in economic activity that are occurring through these trends. Now we can see traditional industry and product verticals are breaking down all over the place, as you see the disruption that climate and technology together is bringing and driving companies to find new lines of businesses as their traditional businesses come under existential threats. Think oil and gas companies and the vehicle manufacturers for that matter. And you can't hope to effectively govern for these sorts of shifts if you don't refresh your board regularly and you bring in the sort of diversity of thought, experience and skills that is going to be helpful in navigating these challenges. Now, it sounds easy in theory, but in practice, we all know that's quite difficult. And the starting point for the challenge is actually how you promote the refresh in the first place. For us at CLP, we introduced a retirement guideline a number of years ago as a way to promote a gradual refresh of the board. And through that guideline, we've had a number of directors retire. Once the vacancies appeared, it was critical that we didn't just simply recruit younger versions of essentially the same person to join the board. So we engaged search firms to help find the sort of directors with the skills and experience that would be helpful in navigating the challenges that we faced, in particular with respect to climate. Now, effectively addressing an issue like climate change also requires building the sorts of skills, experience, and proficiency on the board. That can't be done by just one meeting where we're dealing with a sustainability report. It has to be a regular topic on the agenda of board meetings. And while I don't recommend specifically going out to recruit a climate expert to join the board, periodic expert briefings by people that do have the knowledge and experience of the impacts of climate change on the business of your company is a really useful way of building that knowledge and capability on the board. Now, there is a huge opportunity here for us as governance professionals. I think one of the great challenges that I see from sustainability experts and ESG practitioners in getting traction is that whilst they often have the technical knowledge and skill, they don't have the knowledge and experience of how boards work and how decisions are made to actively and effectively influence the board decision-making process. As governance professionals, you all have that in spades. So if you take the time to learn about the impact of climate on your business, where the risks and opportunities are, you can play a really powerful role in helping your company navigate through the challenges and towards the rewards. And for all the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, your company needs you to rise to this opportunity. So in conclusion, the science is overwhelmingly telling us that the extreme weather events and natural disasters are only going to continue and get worse. And there are many good reasons for companies to take action now to manage those risks, but more importantly, to find the opportunities that spring from the economic changes that will happen as a result. Rising to the challenge of climate change requires a governance framework and governance professionals that are fit for purpose. Modest changes to governance framework, gradually refreshing the board and focusing on building the skills and experience are required for a climate-capable board can make an outsized impact on whether your company can successfully navigate these challenges. Hong Kong has a net zero target by 2050, and every company will need to play its part. So I want to leave you all with one simple question. What is your company's plan? Thank you very much.
Harnessing technological advances and managing technology-related risks are two sides of the same coin. Technology has transformed the way we work, communicate, and live our lives. It has given us access to vast amounts of information, made our lives more convenient, and enabled us to be more productive. However, it has also created new risks, such as cyber threats, data breaches, and privacy violations. To harness technological advances, it is important to manage these risks effectively. The topic of Session 2 is Harnessing Technology. Adam Stuckert, the Group Chief Digital Officer at Tricor Group, explains how the process of utilizing new technologies can improve and enhance various aspects of our work.
In my session today, I'd like to share my views on harnessing technological advancement. I think we all understand that over the past several years, the pace of technology change has increased rapidly. And that's also true for corporate governance, for corporate secretarial work, for other parts of the business that we may be most familiar with. So today I want to share my practical learnings and my practical advice on how we can harness this technological change, but also help our organizations to adjust and adapt as the pace of change continues to be high in the future. So first, I want to start with a little story. I think at this point, all of us would know what this is. This is obviously a restaurant delivery robot, especially in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. These are pretty common in Hong Kong and across a lot of Asia. But 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, many of us wouldn't have had the experience of seeing one of these in a restaurant. And that just speaks to the pace of change that we're all going through. The topic that I want to discuss first today is that pace of change and how we can build and create digital experiences and make use of technology while we're still experiencing this very, very quick rate of change in the industry. During the pandemic, it's no question that almost all companies increased their speed of digitization and their rate adoption of a technology. Actually, in a survey done, 97% said that the pandemic accelerated the rate of digital transformation. Now, this can take a lot of different forms, and I'm sure all of you in the audience have experienced this to some extent. For some companies, it may have been the use of virtual or digital meeting. For other companies, it might have been implementation of new systems. And then certain industries obviously moved faster than others. But what this really means is for companies like ours, especially in areas like corporate governance, what might have in the past been a 1 or 2 year project might have been done in 2 or 3 months. And that rate of change is maybe 10, 20, or even 30 times quicker than what we saw in the past. In my own experience, when I think about this pace of change, there's some key ways that we can handle creating digital experiences. So let me share 3 points of view on how we can implement the best type of technology or the most impactful and practical technology that's really down to earth and useful for ourselves, for our employees, for our staff, for our clients and customers under this expectation of really fast pace of change. And the first piece of advice is make sure that you're using the technologies that you're trying to push. So for example, in corporate governance, digital signatures are a really key and increasingly used technology. But I find a lot of companies are willing to use digital signatures with their clients, but not internally. The act of using the technologies that we're talking about, whether it's process automation like digital signatures, or artificial intelligence or the use of data, if we're not using those things ourselves, it's very difficult for us to partner with other companies, for our employees to see that these technologies will help them in their day-to-day lives, and so on. So using your own technology is really key. Co-creating with staff to solve problems. I'll share an example later today of one of the big changes that we went through at Tricor, but co-creating the solution to problems in workflow, in approvals, in governance with staff using technology allows you to have the insight from the bottom up of how technologies are going to be used and make sure that they're beneficial for all parts of the organization. And then finally, acknowledge or realize that actually technology change is not really about the technology at all. In my long career, I've implemented a lot of big systems. I've made a lot of technological change. But the number one thing that influences whether the company is successful with this new technology or whether it has the benefits that we're all expecting is to what extent we accommodate human change. That could be training, that could be helping people to understand how technology can make their day-to-day jobs better, and so on. I would say at least 30 to 50% of the effort in a big technological change, whether you're talking about digitizing the boardroom or helping with workflows for corporate governance, is really about the human side. So you should allocate a lot of the time and thoughtfulness and budget of a project to that type of change. So a good example in Tricor, in this picture you see here on the left, before the implementation of some new technologies, including process automation and artificial intelligence, that was the scene in some of our offices. We still had a lot of paper, and we had a lot of manual work related to processing forms and making regulatory submissions and so on behalf of our clients. On the right is the aftershot. That shows how the office looked after we implemented some process automation, some automated document scanning, and some simple artificial intelligence that could take values from a page and automatically enter them into a system. These types of small changes make a big impact on people's lives, and they also increase the quality and consistency of our corporate governance. Obviously, if we're using technology, then we have a better chance of being on top of the data, on top of submission deadlines, on top of all parts of a corporate governance process. And we did this by co-creating, like I said, by making sure we're using the technology ourselves and also focusing on the human side of the change. So the first point is about the pace of change. And with those 3 pieces of advice, I think that we can adjust to a very fast or very high rate of technological change. But we also can't lose sight of the fact that our digital products, our use of technology is impacting our customers and our staff every day. So I want to share how at Tricor and in my career, we approach a customer and staff focus. So first of all, customers are expecting consistent experiences, but then their expectations are actually not that high. Live chat features, which I think you may have seen on your bank's website or on an insurer's website, where you're able to chat live with either a bot or a real person, that's usually about all that people are expecting. They're not really expecting very, very advanced artificial intelligence or other crazy cutting edge features. Actually, our staff and our clients will be happy if we can get just some good, consistent experiences that help them to use technology, maybe to make their day-to-day life easier. So recently, we went through this kind of experience, trying to help our corporate services clients to be able to interact with Tricor more digitally. And I want to share some simple pieces of advice, some simple ways or straightforward ways that we can develop good digital experiences. First of all, we're very clear to write out expectations about how people will use technology, but not forget to talk with them. A lot of companies do the first part on the left very well. They write out a really great requirements document or a detailed use case document. But then once it's written down, they kind of forget to test it out with the people that are actually using it. So back to my example from before about digital signatures. Yeah, you have a digital signature platform that allows the people to apply signatures on particular pages, but maybe it forces them to repeat the signature over and over again for many different documents, instead of just allowing them to do it once and checking that it's in the right places. So talking with users, whether they're our internal staff or our customers and clients, is extremely important in developing a good digital experience. And you get lots of feedback or points of view that you might not have thought of. This is certainly true for us at Tricor. Second of all, we put a lot of emphasis on designing and producing prototypes. In the old days of technology implementation, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room have experience with this, you might spend 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 months doing definition of requirements, then maybe 1 or 2 years building a system. At the end, you get a system that works according to the original requirements, if you're lucky. But in the worst case, you might not really have the hands-on experience of how it's going to be used. So in these days, by the year 2022, you may have heard some news recently that Adobe is buying a company called Figma. Figma is a perfect example of the kind of software that allows you to build digital experience prototypes. There are a number of tools. Some are more simple, and it's just the graphics of how a particular software might look, and some are more complicated. So depending on how complicated or complex your software or your digital solution is, using a prototyping tool will allow you to not only gather feedback from users, but really visualize and see how technology is going to impact the business. So as an example, for corporate governance, board reporting is one of the key trends over the last several years. If you were to develop a board dashboard or implement a board reporting dashboard, having a prototype that allows all the members of the board, as well as other key stakeholders, shareholders, and so on, to see what the reports are going to look like and how they might be able to act or dive into the data is really critical. If you don't do that, then you run the risk that in real life use, the application might not serve the purpose that you actually wanted to achieve. And as I said a few minutes ago, the most important part of technology change is human change. So observing how technology impacts humans in real life through a prototype is extremely important. And so that brings me to the third part of my talk today, which is about building the right foundations. So we know that the pace of change is very, very high. And we know that remaining focused on the actual end users, whether they're our customers or our clients or our internal staff, is important. But what are the key foundations that we have to have in place that are non-negotiable in order to have success in the speed to market and customer focus? Now, a lot of people talk about platform businesses, and I think in some ways, we're all going towards this kind of model. A platform business doesn't have to be as cutting edge as the two examples on the page, Airbnb and Uber, but it just implies that all of our companies, everyone in this room, we're becoming more and more interconnected in a technology way. So you may be integrating directly with suppliers. You may be sharing some of your board or other governance reporting directly with a regulatory agency. So we need to be prepared for this world where through technology, we're all more and more interconnected. In our own evolution at Tricor, we've moved from independent applications to single platforms, and then in the future, a more integrated platform. And my point here is not so much to talk about Tricor, but to share our experience building foundations for this type of evolution. So there's a few points that I would share. First of all, cybersecurity and securing data and systems is critical. And I know KT, after my presentation, will talk a little bit about cybersecurity in this current era for corporate governance. Second, our people must be given the tools and skills to change. So whether it's training, as I mentioned before, or even just the software and other hardware or technology capabilities, like access to cloud storage or the use of laptops, that's absolutely critical in order to build that solid foundation. And then third is that significant improvements can be made with relatively simple technologies. So I know that everyone always wants to implement the latest cutting edge technology. They want to use AI, they want to use big data. But in a lot of cases, putting in place relatively more known and understood technologies, like, for example, workflow technology or system-to-system integration technology, helps a lot in building those foundations for future integration or future platform businesses. So one particular example is having a platform that you can use to integrate with other companies or other systems. Maybe it's via API or even via simple data sharing like CSV or Excel files. That can really help, because once the basic technology is in place, every time you want to integrate to a supplier or a regulator or with another company, you have that capability already there waiting to go. So some investments in baseline technologies like integration, reporting, workflows, and so on can really put you in a good position. And then later, you can implement more advanced technologies like artificial intelligence or data mining. So altogether, I covered a lot today, but I think those three key points I would like everyone in the audience to take away. First is the pace of change. We know that that pace is increasing and likely to increase into the future. So making sure that we have the capabilities in our organization, we're using our own technologies, we're building up the skills of our people and so on is really key. Second, customer or client or staff focus, making sure that we prototype and we build lighter versions of things so that we can see how it really works before making the huge investment and rolling out in a broader way. And third, foundations, making sure our cybersecurity is as mature as possible and is really up to date, and making sure that we have the tools and basic technologies in place so that we can build on that for the future. That's everything I'd like to share for today. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Mr. Kok Tin Gan is a partner at PwC Hong Kong. He will give us insights into managing technology-related risks, which involves identifying and mitigating potential risks associated with the use of technology.
So what I intend to do in this session is to complement what Adam has shared. To me, security goes hand in hand in innovation. Security should not stop any innovations. A lot of times I heard some of the my clients out there, they're saying, all security guys say this is not secure, this is not right. And I personally think that that's an old school of thoughts. A good security person will say that this is the way you're going to do it, and this is the way I'm going to secure it. Security is important because it will help you to maximize your ROI. If you go into digital without security, that means you are you're putting yourself at risk. You might be hacked. To me, I always use the same example, like Hong Kong is a very successful banking sector, and AML, the anti-money laundering law, enable Hong Kong to become a successful financial center, so as security. Security is always the digital enabler and is always the innovation enabler. So that would be my topic today. So first of all, I'd like to share a bit of data points. I'm going to brush this through fairly quickly because I think everyone knows about this issue. It's alarming. Just want to share again, this turns out to be one of the most worrying issue among all the executive. The impact is unpredictable. The impact is big. You might be asleep and the next day you wake up, you found that all your computers, everything has been encrypted and you can't operate, and you're being threatened to pay the ransom, and of course your data has been leaked, and lots of consequence. After that, we all know that there are more and more laws coming in governing the way how we handle the data. And this is just another example. In our profession, we have a term called TTP. TTP is called Tactics, Techniques and Procedures. So in short, these are the attack scenario. So attack goes by scenario. For example, phishing is one, going into mobile is one, going to cloud is one, messaging WhatsApp is one. These are all the scenarios that could happen. So you look at the compounded growth of this scenario. So that again, my personal takeaway of this number is obviously the attack surface. Not sure you're familiar with this term. Attack surface is a very important term. The more digital you are, the more attack surface you have. So inherently, if you are going to do digital business, and I probably know that in all the organizations that I speak to now, digital is their key transformation, is one of their key business strategy. Again, if that is the case, that means your attack surface is increasing. That means your investment going into cybersecurity has to increase also. And of course, the DNA of the people has to change as well. So that's one, attack surface and increase, and obviously the scenario has increased. Obviously, that means more and more people trying, and more people or the bad guys out there are using different types of techniques to come into the organization. So again, that makes the organization out there as a defense, on the defense side, make their job a bit more complexity into it. I'm going to brush this through fairly quickly as well, just talk a bit more about the motivation of the hack. Managing a cyber war is important. It's a bit like the Sun Tzu art of war. You have to know your enemy, you have to know yourself. So you have to know why do they come to you, what are they interested of, so that you know how to defend. So I would say that 90% or close to 100%, 95% organization in Hong Kong, you're subject to financial crime criminal. So financial crime criminal is actually not that hard to defend. That means they come after you because they want money. So the tactic to defend against the cyber criminal is to elevate yourself from a low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit means that, for example, like you're running a shop, you shop without CCTV, without a lock, that is a low-hanging fruit. So when you run your digital space, when you run your attack surface, making sure that you have enough padlocks and you know how to run it, and if you are no longer a low-hanging fruit, they will go after another organization. So it's not that difficult, okay? So that's the theory. So you're not going to be 100% safe, but you don't have to be. You just have to make it difficult so that they go to, again, another organization. So the difficult one is espionage. Obviously, that's due to the nature of the organization, your spy. And, just like the MI6 movie, like the James Bond, there'll be always nation will use this sort of tactic, and they will continue because that's the new space that human being created, and lots of investment going in. So for that, obviously, the tactic is a bit more difficult, but it's not like an unsolvable problem. You just have to be more dedicated and put in more sophisticated people as well as defense mechanism. In the next session, I'm going to share a bit more provoking thoughts here, rather than brush through some of the simple stuff that you can Google. And some of my viewpoints on why cyber hackings are on the rise, right? So obviously, the first one I touched on already. I think We all know that human being created this space. If you just look at the amount of time that you spend on your phone and your computer versus like 10 years ago, you know that the virtual world is expanding. Now everything that we talk about innovation in cyberspace, AI, cloud, metaverse, cryptocurrency, NFT, everything is there. It's getting bigger. And you and I, we are human beings. We believe that is the next generation economy. Data economy is all there. Okay, it's bigger. Okay, but are we really taking care of that bigger world? Probably not yet. If you take one example, my view is that the law to me has not kept up with the pace of the growth of digital space. The reason why I say that because I think law, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding of the law is that it still go by geographical. That means the law in Hong Kong apply to geographical in Hong Kong, but the problem is in the cyberspace, there's no border. And we all know that I don't have to sit in Hong Kong to hack a Hong Kong company. That's very simple. I can sit overseas, and we know that, again, there's no border. There's no borderless law. So catch me if you can. And again, I know a lot of hackers. You can say they're white hat or black hat, but actually I can tell a lot of people commit crime. It's not because they're bad. Maybe they're treated unfairly in the reality world, but again, there's no consequence, the way I see it. Catch me if you can. So my personal take that the crime will be still on the rise. I don't see how international countries, they work together in solving this problem. I see this imminent issue is like very similar to sustainability. So we're going to work like in different nations to solve this issue. Okay. The other one, also another issue, people like us are in the hacking world. Our job is to find bugs for big corporations. We call that bug bounty program. And you can tell that, like Apple pay $1 million for one bug. This is not bad for money, but to be frank, if I have Apple bug, I will not give it to Apple. 1 million is not enough for me, to be honest, because I know that there are more organizations out there who will pay me more than $1 million. So that becomes a problem. We all sitting down here, most of us are consumer of IT, right? You are using Apple, you're using Microsoft, you're using other brands. The problem is when you install with a brand, it comes with a hole. And traditionally, all these big tech firms, they rely on bug bounty to manage their bug. But the bug bounty ecosystem has been disrupted. So Microsoft does not even know there's a bug exists. We call that 0 day. And if you ask me, 0 day is probably the most important issue that the industry is facing. So be prepared when you install something on your system, it comes with a bug where the software owner doesn't even know. I'm going to brush it through in terms of time. Happy to share my slide. Last but not least, I'm going to take a couple of more minutes to share some of the response procedures that for all of you to think about. Again, my view is that there's a lot of guidance out there. There's security by design, there's privacy by design. We long talk a lot about that. My view is that day one, I call it day one security myself. I think that's very important. The moment that you think about you want to go into digital space, whether it's payment, whether it's AI, whether it's workflow, think about the security features that you want to design as well. I often ask my client, do you need a multi-factor authentications for this system? If they ask me what is that, I will see that the DNA of the project needs to be improved a little bit because they need to insulate the cybersecurity into it. What sort of encryptions and how does the keys going to work? Like all these features will need to be considered. Can we put it on cloud? Which cloud? How's the backup is going to be done? How we're going to monitor the abnormal traffic? All these potential attacks scenarios. How we're going to run that through? Remember that the more digital you are, you have to be more cybersecurity savvy. And the more digital you are, you have more attack surface, you'll be subject to more hacking. There's nothing wrong with that if you incorporate day one security. And second, like I mentioned just now, the bug bounty ecosystem has been disrupted. So be prepared. Be prepared to get hacked. Okay? So what does that mean? Obviously, you don't want that to happen. And most of the time when I go to the board, how can we stop this? How can we prevent this? So when I tell them about the bug bounty story, they all ask me, so KT, what would be my solution? So I often tell people, so if you have $10 investing into cybersecurity, okay, in the past, you probably spent $10 on try to prevent this from happening. But nowadays, yeah, you still want to try to prevent that, but you know there are certain things out of your control, like I just mentioned, the scenario that I just shared. So what you can do is probably you still spend $6 or $7 on some of the technologies to prevent that, but you need to spend the remaining amount of money into detecting, just like CCTV. But of course, CCTV is not very smart. There's a lot of smarter technologies in the cyber world that you can do, automated detections, the AI technologies that help you to detect the scenario, baselining it as well. So it's important that you invest certain amount into detection, because you know that the hacker, there are ways to come in. And actually, when I respond for a client over a breach, I will often tell client, it's not scary if you see the hacker in your network. As long as you can see the hacker in a complete manner, and you know what the hacker wants, actually it's not that scary. It's just like risk management, right? The concept. If you know the risk, you can put in place certain controls to manage that. So as cybersecurity, again, you got speed, you got visibility, it's not that scary. And I like to use an example sometimes, it's like COVID. We can live together, or as long as you can see the hacker, what they're trying to do, and how they intend to do your network. I'm going to wrap this up. Again, I talk about some of the laws, try to keep up the pace of stuff. Obviously, like it or not, digital will be, I think, with us. Again, I think human beings believe in that. There's the next economy. More and more law is coming up. So, and just be careful, because more and more stringent law and more fine penalty. To me, that's a good thing. Again, if human being thinks that is the next generation, that's where we want to be, and having more laws and show more love and trust in the cyberspace will help us to sustain our ROI or investment, our innovation in cyberspace. I hope you all find my sharing a bit insightful. Some people give me some feedback. Some of my sharing sometimes is a bit depressing, which is not. It's just that I think collectively, we have a role to play to secure the cyberspace. Thank you so much.